Thanks for tuning into our podcast. We love having you here, and it's our mission to bring you all the latest and greatest tips, skills, and know-how to make you the best that you can be. We know that you have it in you, and we're going to show you how. Now, let's get started.
Here is your host.
Good morning, everybody. This is the Dr. Love Show, and hey, man, I am truly excited about this morning. Hey, we got an amazing show for you this morning where we talk about education, politics, faith, how to move closer and closer to your destination and your purpose. And so, hey, y'all, I have two amazing guests with me this morning who's going to co-host this show, who has a lot of tips, information, news to share with you that's really going to bless you this morning. So for everybody, you want to call your friends, call your neighbors, call your cousin, call your grandma and say, hey, we have got to tune into the Dr. Love Show this morning because it is going to be off the chain. So coming to you live right now, I have my good friend and none other from Langston to the world, Al Shaheed Muhammad. Everybody give it up for Al Shaheed this morning.
Oh!
Right. You know what I'm saying? So, I got that good brother from another mother. And, man, he's been an inspirational friend to me throughout the years, man. And just really have blessed me tremendously as a friend, as a colleague in ministry, and just been an all-around just good friend to me. And I'm truly honored to have him on the show, none other than my brother, Pastor Tim.
Oh! Tim on the show. Yeah.
Yes, we understand, y'all. We about to get started and get into some rich content today, y'all. So, hey, y'all, what's going on, Pastor Tim?
Oh, all is well, man. I'm excited. It's an honor and a privilege to be around the Dr. Love Show. You're going to kill some things, Doc. I can't wait to see what God does next. Let's get it in.
I know that's right, man. Come on, what's up? What's going on, Al Shaheed, man? What's going on, brother, man?
Oh, man, the same old, just all about this work, trying to elevate and motivate our people to move in the right direction. That's been about it.
Man, I know that's, but dude, you've been,
yeah.
I know, but man, you've been, man, I see you actively involved, engaged in community, man, and really making a change in community and just really out there for the heart of the people and to move our community, most importantly, our community to do better and to see the possibilities that they have within themselves to be all that they can be. And,
that's right.
So it's just very inspirational to kind of see that from that standpoint and vantage point, man, of what you're doing and how you're doing it. So it's just an honor for you. I'm honored to have you as a guest on the show, man, and co-host and everything else, man. So, hey, y'all, the first thing I kind of wanted to kind of talk about is, this thing about purpose and moving in purpose. And sometimes people don't realize how they have the ability to do that within themselves. And they allow fear or any other anomaly or circumstance or situation to make them remove themselves of fully kind of embracing that and walking into that purpose. So, Pastor Tim, can you share with the people maybe an experience or two that you've had to whereas you've allowed God to move purposely in your life and the outcome was far greater than what you thought?
Well, the current business that my wife and I have just ventured into is a business that had some depth of investment. It was a business that took a leap of faith, and I before I can go into it, I got to say this. You mentioned about walking in purpose and fear basically paralyzing you and not keeping you or not allowing you to do what God has called you to do and to exercise the level of purpose that we should all have in our lives. I think one of the things that kills most of us is a lack of identity, not knowing who we are. And when you don't know who you are, it is virtually impossible to live out any level of true purpose in your life. And so as I grow up, and I'm continually growing up, even in my 40s, I'm still growing up. I'm learning every day more and more about who I am and who God made me to be, the depth of my being, the understanding, the soberness of my thinking, what makes sense, what really doesn't make sense, even though the world says it does, but it really doesn't. And just stop being so much of a follower of the things of the world and being a follower of Christ in all of my living. And so when I approach the mentality and the written game, because before there's a living game, there's a written game.
Come on.
Before you start doing anything, you really need to write it down. And Scripture says to write it, to write the vision, make it plain, not just for you, but so that those who come behind you can see what you wrote and run the same race. So it has to make sense. So everything you do ultimately isn't just for you; it's for the generations to come to be able to exercise that same gifting, that same level of purpose, and go beyond it. But we lived out the written game. The written game was scary, man. I admit it. It was very, very scary. Very scary. It put us on the limb in some places, and it extended us much further. Well, you know how I am. I try to be a good steward. I think there's a difference between faith and good stewardship. I think sometimes we call leaps of faith. When we know we're being bad stewards over our money, we'll swear up and down. I'm just walking by faith. I'm living by faith. No, dude, you being a bad steward. Tripping, money in real, but now you want to say I'm living by faith. No, you're not. So I'm like, man, I try to be keen and wise about that. So long story short, when we wrote it down and we started seeing the level of investment, time, everything, then we began to pray about whether or not that's what we should do. And as we pray, the more we prayed, the less fear we had.
Wow.
And when we talked about it and got confirmation about it in our spirits, the less, even though it was a risk on paper, it wasn't a risk for our spirit.
Wow.
And so we began to move on it, and then now we are where we are, and the investment is complete. So now we're just waiting to see the level of manifestation in what God has allowed us to invest. So my point is this: we got to make sure your written game is strong, and make sure your conversation with God is continuous. And then the fear and and that paralyzes you won't be so heavy. But before you do anything, you need to have a level of identity, knowing who you are. And that's how.
Dude, one of the things you said about, I'm just kind of, and kind of like that mic drop piece where you go, you got to know the level of who you are and your identity. That was huge for me, man, because I think one of the things that we move into is because we don't know who we are. And so we're trying to fish and find, is this right or that right, or is this right or that right, and not really kind of embracing who we are and what God has called us to so we can fulfill that piece. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So we tend to kind of move around, and maybe this is it, or maybe that, instead of consulting God first in that piece, so that we can move in that. But I do understand the fraction of sometimes you gotta fish, because in the fish you find yourself. You know what I'm saying? And in the fish you find yourself about who you are. And so I truly believe that is a process within itself as well. So, but man, I think the manifestation of what God can do, what He will do, is based upon our faith and our trust in Him. So, absolutely.
But I'll tell you, this is what really blew my mind, though, Dr. Al Shahid. This is what really blew my mind, though. I'm learning more and more every day that your destination does not identify you. Your identity reveals destination.
All right.
And we got to understand that. We got to really get that, because a lot of us are running toward a destiny that does not belong to us.
Right.
And so when we're running toward a place that isn't even ours, I'll tell you, I was teaching a lesson the other day, and it messed me up, because in the Old Testament, the children of Israel were walking, right? And they're trying to get to what's called the promised land, right? Mm-hmm. So they're traveling, trying to get there. As they're getting there, the closer they get, God begins to tell them, now you're going to go through the land that belongs to Lot. It's going to be a gorgeous land. Don't try to take land that doesn't belong to you.
Right.
You're going to go by what belongs to Esau. It's going to be a gorgeous land, very prosperous land. When you get past that land, don't try to take that land. It's going to look real good to you. It's not yours. Keep moving. And he continues to talk about the places they're going to pass that does not belong to them, but it's going to look very attractive to them. Don't try to grab it.
Right.
And basically what he's saying is you need to know who you are in me before you start moving. Because if you start moving before you know who you are in me, you're going to find things that will look attractive, that will look like your destination, that will look like your end, and you're going to find very quickly that it does not belong to you, it doesn't fit you, it doesn't blend with your life, and ultimately what looks like a blessing will end up being a curse.
That's right.
So if you find out who you are first, then he will reveal to you your destination. Run destination first, man, you're going to fly wrong. It's going to kill you.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely, man. That's powerful right there because you got to yield first and understand who you are and where you're going first. So Al Shahid, talk to me, brother. What's going on in your world, man? How has that leap of faith in walking out there has been instrumental in your life?
Man, it goes back to what Pastor was saying a few minutes ago. It's just really identifying who you are and understanding your gifts and talents and how you mine those and refine those to shape and mold you. Because everyone who was born has a specific talent. Everyone is different. But unfortunately, we're being guided by social media. We're being guided by television. We're being guided by radio to think a certain way. And it takes us away from our God-given talent. That's why prayer is so important. That's why fasting is so important. That's why having good brotherhood is so important, so you can vibe off each other and mend on each other's talents. The leap of faith with me and my wife was when we stepped out the same way as Pastor. You know, we quit, I should say, retired early. We retired early, and I mean, you know, my wife was a VP of an accounting firm. You know, I was a principal at a school at the time, and we was ready to do something different and do something for ourselves. I mean, you know, we're members of the Nation of Islam, and one of the principles that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan teaches is do for self. And you know, that was kind of easy for me to grasp because I came from an entrepreneurial type family. Yeah. But you start to see the benefits of that. When you want to go to school, you go to college, you want to get a job. That's what's preached to you your entire time from others, and you thinking that's the way. But really, your independence is the way, where you can depend on your own talent, especially when you serve a sovereign God. You know, if he doesn't depend on that and he is your greatest example, then you shouldn't depend on that in this man's world that has been set up against us, because we are the talented ones. So we liquidated our 401ks and we said we was going to go for broke. You know, and start this STEM school.
I know that part.
Yes, sir.
You know what I'm saying? So, you know, we sat down, we prayed about it, and prayer is so important because it humbles you and it lets you, you know, reflect and assures you that you're going in the right direction. But you have to be able to go for broke. You know, you can't have any fear, and you got to trust in your ability to do the right thing. You know, and if God is with you, then he'll bless you and you'll know it. But but difficulty comes after ease every time. Every time the difficulty comes, it's to refine you. So those who are growing and trying to start their own businesses, if you hit a roadblock, that don't mean quit. It means it's something that you got to go back and look at so you can go to the next step. It's just like a marriage. It goes in cycles. So we liquidated our 401ks. And, you know, that whole last year I used to be a principal over at Bessie Coleman Middle School here in Cedar Hill. And I was writing up the plan in the office every day. Just had it on the whiteboard. You know, I would call you and tell you about the situations and stuff that we're going through. And just the politics and really trying to reach our students and reach our children and make sure that they can see a future for themselves. So we decided to go that route. So we started out in our home. Now, mind you, you got to understand like the lifestyle that we was used to, you know what I'm saying? The income that we was used to bringing in. And then you got to maintain that on a lower, you budgeted how you budget, but still you have to be more disciplined to cut back and not be excessive just to maintain that. And I have a huge family, you know what I'm saying? I got 5 children. So all that plays into the factor, all that plays into like insurance plans and how we're going to do this, all that, you know, so it's a lot of stress at times. And I remember at one point, you know, my wife was like, shoot, I'm about to go get a job. And I was like, nah, man, you're going to waste more energy going to get a job. By the time you get all that, we can figure this thing out. You know? went that route. You know what I'm saying? We know that stress. But now to look back at it, and now, we 5 years in the game. We got 2 commercial spots now. We're on a busy street in DeSoto, high traffic street. And, we just opened up a new branch to our school. And it came in full. We only maybe have like 3 slots left out of both campuses. It's been a blessing. And I tie it all into the work that I do with the nation also. I mean, we out in the community. We out, feeding the homeless. We got, different programs that we run to bring our people closer to the knowledge of themselves and want to clean themselves up. So as long as I continue to do that, then I figure that he'll continue to bless me and make sure that we can maintain independently. I'm only totally dependent on him.
Man, get out of here, dude. Listen, man. So let me tell. Wait a minute. Wait. Let's kind of retract this. So you liquidated your 401ks, right?
Mm-hmm.
You took the leap of faith and said, God, I'm gonna honor you in this, and I'm gonna do this because I know you. I've identified what you called me to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then you said, I wrote the plan down. I wrote the vision down. Even before I began to even move, I had written it down. So
preparation. That's right.
Yeah, I wrote the plan down. Stepped out.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't let fear kind of make me or break me. My wife got in and she was like, hey, we need to try to maybe add some additional income. He was like, nah. So we just kept moving, operating, not in fear, but in trusting God. And then the outcome of trust was not only one center, but 2 centers now, right?
Right. Yes, sir.
Wow.
Right.
Dude, that's truly trusting God and believing in God, man, and the outcome and for the manifestation of the blessing, dude. So, hey, everybody that's listening to this show, you have got to take in these nuggets about, 1, you got to really write the plan, write the vision of what God has laid upon your heart. 2, you need to be able to self-identify with your purpose in God and what he's leading you to do. 3, you can't walk in fear. You got to walk boldly and not looking back, but always looking forward to what God has prepared for you. And so we just want to encourage you this morning that, hey, live outside of fear, walk in your destiny, move in your purpose, identify what God is calling you to do, write the plan down, move in it, and accept nothing less than what God is telling you for you. Because he absolutely wants the best for you. And that's truly about living in purpose. It's so, hey, it's going to be, just give us a quick pause, a quick minute. We're going to come back right after this music selection piece, and we'll be right back.
It might seem crazy what I'm about to
Man
say.
said, go for broke. Woo! Yes, sir.
That's how you got to be all in. You have to.
Hey, I dig that, man.
Yeah, 'cause if you're not all in, you're not going to see any progress. That's just what it is, and you know that.
Oh yeah, I just love the mentality. You know what I mean? Because I think what breaks a lot of relationships is that when you got 2 people pulling in different directions.
Yes, sir.
Man, it's like a house divided. It don't always fall.
That's right.
I've watched some brothers, man, and I feel bad for them because they're pulling in one place and their wife is pulling in a whole different direction. And it's obvious even how they handle each other, how they talk to each other. And I'm like, man, it's going to be virtually impossible for you to do what you're trying to do when your other part is pulling another direction. Because when God says that the 2 become one flesh, that's what he means. And then your souls become tied together. And so if y'all come against each other, man, it'll never work.
See, that's why I like, in the nation, we got like a courtship process. Because most people get married off love. You know what I'm saying? And so you get a chance to you have rules and regulations. You can actually meet the person on a mental stage before. I wish I would have had that when I found my wife. I just loved her. You know what I'm saying? But sometimes, when you learning yourself and you growing up, these are just the hardships that you take on the road. So, but that process of learning,
Here is your host.
You see those relationships, because I counsel couples too, and you see they pulling in different directions, and they do it just won't work. They end up getting a divorce. You know what I'm saying? And then it always goes back to the root of why did you get married in the first place?
Mm.
Okay. So coming back in here on the Dr. Love show, we're back in. But they was having that sidebar conversation. Yes, that be some of the good stuff right there, that good meat. So I didn't want to interrupt because we will all want this good meat on this show. But moving to a new topic level and new things about here in education. One of the things that we're seeing in education today is that we are seeing that our subpopulations, our African American students, our Hispanic students are making some equal gains in education. However, there still seems to be a lack. And then I was reading this article the other day, guys, about the prison to pipeline, or the school to prison pipeline article, and it talked about how there has been some progress, but yet still though we still have a lack of our student to a movement in education. So, in looking at the state of education today, and as an educator myself, I know that we are moving to this college readiness model here in Texas. I know that we are making sure that kids come out with associate's degrees and industry-based certifications, and so they can go into the world of work, and really trying to change the landscape and dynamics. The other part of that thing is that our communities, which is African American communities and some of our Hispanic families, communities, are not movement as a greater rate and speed as their counterparts. And so I want to ask you guys, beginning with Al Shahid, man, what is your thoughts on that? What do you think about that? And how do you think we can move forward in this next level of education?
I think, good question. Thank you, Dr. Love, for the question. My first question would be, it would be a question back at what is college readiness? What do they mean by college readiness? When you're saying that you are ready for college, what is college supposed to teach us? I think the detriment in education to us is that it is not bringing out the best in us. It's putting us in a format or in a structure that gets you used to prison life in a way, shape, or form. They're not teaching us to be entrepreneurs. They're not teaching us to build. They're not teaching us to go back even to our, even Langston University, take for instance. Langston University is not a land grant college. They founded that by black people, just like all the towns in Oklahoma. That makes it very unique in its own structure. From them giving us something than us making something. You know what I'm saying? It's two different things. So for me, it starts at the pre-K level, teaching them knowledge of self, teaching them what they've built before on the planet, showing them these darker people on the planet building and working and always building and working, and the historical view of, okay, when did this shift change on the timeline? Now look at what we're doing, right. And kind of bringing out the best part of us even during the worst of times. And so I think education in our community, the way it's set up, is keeping us in a slave mentality. It's keeping us in a mindset of always wanting to serve someone else and not serve our people. Wow. And so that makes it different, the way it's set up towards us, where we tell the Asians can come in, the Indians can come in, those from other countries who wasn't subjugated to this type of mind state or mental stress and trauma throughout the years, they can come in because they were not turned. They were not turned from being producers to being consumers. So we have been turned into straight consumer nations, even educationally, even the way we find jobs, even the way how we live our lives. It's just how we look at things. So it all falls back on what the good pastor was saying earlier, is that it's a knowledge of self. We got to know who we are. That stimulates everything.
Right, and I do believe that the knowledge of self and understanding who we are is very critical, man. And so I think it goes back to a time frame by which, in slavery mentality mindset, you were cultivated, culturized into thinking that all you had to do was serve. You know what I'm saying? And not that an innovative mindset that I can be greater than what I'm supposed to be. And I think one of the key things is about we're all saying, and on this theme that we're running throughout this show is identity of self, knowing who you are, and being called to that. I believe that we have missed the boat somehow when all we want to do since and it's not a bad thing. I'm just since integration, all we want to do was assimilate and become part of the status quo of the broader culture, and not really identify with our own culture and our own people and our own self, so that we can move ourselves to a greater and a higher level calling. And so with that yields that we have just kind of accepted status quo in a sense. And so in accepting status quo that has yielded us a level of some progression, because I do believe we've made some progression. I think what we can truly become and what we can become is when we really identify with who we are, and I believe that will take us even higher.
Yeah.
Pastor Tim,
Absolutely.
you want to jump in, bro?
Yeah, sure.
Jump in.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I was listening to both of you guys, and that makes sense. I think we kind of miss the natural progression of things. If you look at a parent-child relationship, in the beginning of the parent-child relationship, it is to discipline and to direct.
Correct.
But the older the child gets, it's more to guide and to nurture. And that's what it's supposed to be. You're supposed to grow up. And once I have disciplined you and directed you in your younger age, the older you get, I have now built a level or a foundation in you to now all I need to do is guide and advise you. And so, and because you have a strong foundation with my guidance and my advice, you'll make good decisions. So if we were to mimic that in the education, it would be a whole lot stronger and more effective for us. Watch education. In the very beginning, it is to prepare.
Right.
Well, that's supposed to be the vein of, fortunately, in the very beginning, during the pre-K years, the K years, elementary, going into junior high, they are preparing us. They're giving us a base of information, a strong foundation. But for some reason, once we started heading toward high school, we're supposed to continue with a preparation, but there has to be a level of direction and understanding giving to where am I going next.
Right.
And that would in turn dictate what I teach you moving forward.
Right.
But unfortunately, when we start getting into the high school years, it starts moving into proving. Let me prove. Let me prove. Let me prove. That's why the testing is geared the way it is. It's about proving. Well, that doesn't help me. That doesn't prepare me. When I get in college, once again, it's about proving. When I finish, am I really prepared for whatever company I'm going to start or whatever business I'm going to begin? Or am I simply I've just proven to you that I can finish?
Correct.
I just proven to you that I can get a degree. And I think that our mentality is failing young people today because, number one, college is not for everybody. And I know people are going to kill me for that. And I get it. But unfortunately, college is not for everybody. But if me going to college will give me what I need to be effective in the business that I'm going to get into, I should go to college. Right. But nobody's given that level of direction and purpose. So now, because the people tell me I should go to college, I just go to college. Right. I have no direction. I have no destiny in mind. I'm just going to college because mom and daddy say I'm supposed to finish school, go to college, and then get a job. Right. But nobody tells me, does that really help me do what I'm trying to do? You know, I don't think we have a level of a real reasoning status, because when it hits high school, it just seems so. It seemed like you really are preparing me for jail for real, because when you get in high school, everybody's taking the same things generally. I know there is some level of specification in there, but for the most part, it's still pretty general. And when you hit high school, man, there's no you get a little bit older now. What really do you want to do with yourself? I feel like once you hit the teenage years, there should be real live conversations about what are your giftings, what do you do well at, where's your heart. Right. I know where you came up at, but what makes you lie? What makes you come alive? What gets you excited? We should be having those conversations with the kids, not only at home but in school as well. And then once we start finding out what makes that child spark, what makes that child enjoyable, what makes him comfortable, what comes naturally to that child, then we should start steering our education toward that thing to develop that thing. And then we find out, okay, now what's necessary for that child to be effective at producing finance through that thing that he's good at, that he enjoys, that brings him joy, that excites him, that brings him life. If we could do that, man, we'd have a whole different caliber. The talk about free thinking, man. It would be amazing. That would be true free thinking because that child had identified once again the reason he was created, and now that he knows why he was created, he can live out the meaning of his creation.
Right, absolutely.
Mm.
So, Al, I know you wanted to jump
Yeah.
in there. So tell me.
Yeah, so
go ahead.
you know, what brought to my mind is when he was saying this is that, you know, just think about, you know, the closest thing that we can see to a civil society that we run is Tulsa, Black Wall Street.
Yes.
Even though there were many towns and, you know, all throughout the states, but Oklahoma was initially supposed to be an all-black state, straight up. That's why it has the most black. Edwin P. McCabe, he went there and got busy, real busy. He founded every black town there. Think about what those children saw educational-wise growing up.
Right.
You look at the old movies and you look at Stone Age movies and you see the children in there with their fathers being blacksmiths making swords. You go around, you see the Hispanic community and they mowing lawns, they children right there. You see them on the construction site, they children right there. How much well will they do mathematically in understanding their destiny and what they need for education compared to ours, to what they see on a large basis when we're talking about self-independence? Mm-hmm. That's the key to it. We got to get. So not only would a child say, okay, I can make some money being an air conditioner. I can make some money repairing refrigerators. I can make some money in the construction. I mean, there's all facets of engineering that we need to own a civil society. And I really think that's the missing piece also, that they don't do an internship with a black-owned, they should. But the only way they can do this is we formulate our own educational system and push it in that direction and force the state to allocate some of our tax dollars into what we know will change this situation that they see in every hood and every ghetto in America. And it's a lack of education, a lack of knowledge of self, a lack of fathers, a lack of disciplines, a lack of everything that we know the answers to, but it's not just being fun. Even when I go to city hall meetings, I mean, all this has to deal with education. When when the child leaves the school and what type of environment that they go into. If you walk some of these hoods and go into some of these apartments and you see the way some of these children are living, and then they come to school a different way, then they leave. It's sad because they really don't have any direction until someone comes there. Like the Bible says, how can they have a teacher unless he be sent? Right. It just don't pop up in school. He come out a real life teacher that can teach him mentally, morally, spiritually, and guide him into a discipline that he can be successful. And they just don't have those opportunities. And it's falling on us now. We're in our 30s and in our 40s, and we're seeing this, you know. So the next generation, what's going to come up after us? And you see, like when you looking on YouTube and you looking on Instagram and IG and all the other platforms, you start to see brothers and sisters. They're talking about entrepreneurship. They're talking about how can we grow wealth. They're talking about these different schemes. So what are their children looking at? So it's a progression that eventually will end in the right direction. I truly believe that. I truly believe that we're the people of God, and everything has to be tried before we fall back on ourselves, because that's where the true power is, in ourselves, not in nobody else. So I see the evolution of it, and we debate on it and we talk about it, but we got to force it in a time like right now, especially when we're looking at what you called earlier Trump, and you didn't really want to talk about Trump, but that's the attitude of the people who put him into office. You see what I'm saying? Right. So you got to see that as a visionary. You know what I'm saying? When you're walking with God, you got to see the vision of what direction is God trying to lead the country, and where do we fall in that? You see what I'm saying? So it's deep, brother Love. It's real deep. Yes, sir.
Well, let me ask you. I have a question though, Al. I'm sorry, I mean cut you off.
Go ahead.
Well, I have a question, Al. Okay, so how do you define the difference between love for self and hate for others? Because we talk about black own this, black own that. We've got to start our own this, start our own that. So how do you delegate the importance of that mentality without growing a hateful mentality?
Well, you don't grow a hateful mentality or a lack for others, because for me, or for us in the teachings when we're talking about a love for self, A knowledge of self is just basically learning the history of your people and what's going on and what's happening to you. Hate for others means that you're going to have some type of hate to another human being that's in the same form as you, but may have a different shade of color than you. But spiritually, you understand that there's a diversity in our universe that God has set up. So you got to respect all cultures and all language, all creeds and all class and all colors. But that comes with elevation, because as you teach this knowledge to the young ones, some of them going to become zealots. Some of them going to become, separatists in their way, but they got to keep going. Because once you get up to a level of understanding where it is, then you like, oh no, we all in this together. But it just so happened this is the history. So you got to walk through that fire, and it's going to trigger some type of emotion. But if no one is there to guide that person through that emotion, then they never keep going up the level so they can rise above their emotions into the thinking of God and see why all this played out the way it played out. It's never about hate. It's all about love. That's why Jesus is in the New Testament and he talks about love. This is all about how a man thinks, what's in a man's heart at this point in time of our development, not so much on the carnal of what we're seeing. That's why Moses had to bring that strong law. So when you talk about what's the difference between self-love and hate, there really is no hate. You hate the unproductiveness of yourself. You hate what God hates, but it's all about loving yourself and loving God since you made in the image and likeness of him.
I'm glad you said that, because I think that in our conversation, because I totally agree with you, but I said that because I think it's so important that we identify the difference, because people will hear us have a conversation about how important it is that that us fathers be there for our children, and that we're there so they're able to mimic us and get an understanding of where they fit in this generation, and just get an understanding of what life looks like and what's next for them, and start seeing clearly with a sober mind the opportunities that lie before them. But when we have that conversation, I think some people gravitate to the idea. So when they say that it's all about them being for them, does that mean they hate us? And I know that that's not the case. And I want to make sure that we're clear about that. That's good.
Absolutely. And then, you got to, when we start gaining this knowledge of self, you start to see that we are the foundation of all discipline on the planet. So when you fast forward to today and then you look at the condition that we arrived in 6,000 years later, then you want to get back to them glory days, but for those who don't understand our history, then they will look at that as something antagonistic or something hurtful and harmful, maybe out of guilt, maybe out of shame. I don't know, whatever emotion enzyme is stimulated through their thyroid. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know off of that. But our focus has to be on self, or we'll be totally annihilated. I mean, if you look at the stats, the way it is health-wise, medical-wise, how many of us are on medicine? How many of us are overweight? How many of us got diabetes? You see what I'm saying? There's an issue. Right. There's an intellectual issue going on with us. There's a mental illness that we got to solve.
And I think that we live in a country and in the world in general where I think we misunderstand the fact that we all come from one gene place.
Right.
At the end of the day, that everybody was birthed from the creation called Adam.
That's right.
And it just so happens that he was a dark man, because it happens to be the truth only because the purest soil you'll ever encounter is dark soil. But that's a different conversation. But my point is this: there's only one being, and that's a human being. Right. And so we all came from that particular race, and it's the human race. And I think that because of the foolishness of man and how we've been so disrespectful toward each other, and unfortunately for years, this dark skin has been so miscounted and disrespected. And so I think that has become the norm now. We've all embraced that to be the truth because it has been the truth for so long. But I believe that ultimately, once we take the journey and have a true, healthy respect and honor for who we are and what we look like, then I think that we can finally get to the place where there are only two people in the world, and that is the believer and the non-believer. That he who receives God as his own and he who does not. And so I think that it takes time to get to that place. But back to what you said, Doc, I done got you way off point. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Y'all done steered the whole conversation I'm like, hey, can
Hijack.
move on back. Yeah, but good stuff, man. But one thing I do believe, I think, is just that we have to. I think in conversation things evolve, and I think what evolves is could become something amazing and great for our listeners. And I think it all plays a part into what we're trying to go. But I do believe this. I think once we in education finally stand on a platform where we treat every kid as equal, when we treat every kid as every kid has the opportunity to be all they can be, I think it will satisfy and will move forward in such a way that it will promote growth in all children. And we want to make sure that we, when you look at one of the things I think in education has to be really resolved, and that is the financial piece, and that's how we fund education financially. And based on your zip code determines your property tax dollars, and your property tax dollars based upon what they contribute to the state funding. And so that also is kind of segregated in itself, because if you live in a low tax bracket, then that school within that community receives minimal to none. If you live and so it could be of the same district, if you can go across the street, and because that's a higher tax bracket, then that school is funded differently. And so it just depends on that. We really have to look at from a global standpoint of how we're going to change this dynamics, and we really have to look at that because such a part of our geographical location is broken up by culture pieces, and so until we begin to reform education in such a way that we can move it on an even level playing field, then all kids can be successful. And I think that breeds into the level of this next segment when we talk about politics and education and the political climate. I think once we begin to unify and people begin to get action oriented and move into the place of wanting to see change and committed to change, that we'll see a level of growth in our communities. We'll see a level of growth in level of engagement. We'll see a level of growth in education. But we truly have to get people to get activated and to get engaged in the process. And I think that's what we're missing in today. It's lack of activation, engagement, and motivation to move. And so that's that thing that we're having the most issues with. And I think it's just that we have to get engaged. But I will say this, though. I do believe that because of the current climate and our political climate, that it is truly bringing people together to say, hey, we won't tolerate this, but we really want to move forward in a unified way. So what do you guys think about that?
I think that when it comes to the current leadership, I think that unfortunately we live in a country where it's a follow the leader mentality. And so currently I've never seen journalism so messed up or screwed up as we see it today. I used to see journalism, and I don't know if you guys remember or not, but when I was young, you turn on the news and literally the broadcaster had no emotion whatsoever. He would literally read from the paper or from the prompter. He had no emotion. He had little to no facial expression. He'd read it and he sounded like a journalist, period. Well, the journalism that you hear today, it's not really journalism. They are literally just forcing upon you their opinion. And if they're for the leadership, they force that on you. If they're not for the leadership, they force that on you. There's just no purity in just give me the information and let me make an objective decision about what I heard. And it doesn't exist today, period. And so when it comes, and so that's problem number one, because now the leader, whoever owns that station or owns that network, now only hires the folks who agree with his point of view. They in turn passionately force that point of view onto the people. We in turn feed off of what we hear on television and agree with whatever they say. And so now they have effectively influenced the opinion for the entire nation, whether it's based on facts or not.
Right.
That's our first issue. The second issue is when I was young, they would tell a 10-year-old kid, you can be anything you want to be, including the president of the United States. Mm-hmm. And that was a wonderful thing. Still to today. Here's the issue. If you tell your kid he can be anything, including the president of the United States, you have just now told that kid that the epitome of success is being the president of the United States.
Right.
What is that kid going to do? That kid is going to, in turn, begin to look at the president of the United States and begin to say, this is what I'm supposed to look like. This is what I'm supposed to act like if I'm going to be the epitome of success.
That's right.
So that means if the president looks this way, that's how I should look.
Right.
If the president, every other word is a cuss word, that's how I should talk. If the president is a bully, I'm going to be a bully. If the president only likes who agrees with him, I'm only going to like whatever the president does, I'm going to do the same because I've been taught that the president is the pinnacle of all success. So when I look at our president and the general leadership as a whole, my issue is possibly not the same as everybody else's issue. I think that there are some decisions that are made that are advantageous toward the belief system that I have.
Right.
Is the intent a pure intent? That's between God and him.
Right.
But some of those decisions are advantageous for that which I believe in my spiritual belief system. But the manner in which it is usually delivered is one that totally insults and disrespects everything I believe in life.
Right.
And because of that, I have a major concern with the direction that we're going in as a country as a whole.
Wow.
And it's hurting our children majorly.
Well, gentlemen, hey, that is our time. We got to wrap up this show for the day, man.
I'm sorry, I said I talked too long. I apologize.
It's all right. Hey, Dr. Love, can I just drop this? Can I drop this verse in Second Timothy? Can I end it on that?
Yeah, we get it on that.
This will cover the political view on my end.
Okay.
2 Timothy 3:1-7 reads, "This know also that in the last days perilous times shall come, for men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetous boasters, proud blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, without natural affection, truce breakers, false accusers, incontent, fierce, despisers of those that are good, traitors, heady, high-minded, lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God, having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof. For such turn away. For of this sort are they which creep into the house and lead captivity silly women laden in sins, lead away with divers lusts, ever learning and never able to come to the knowledge of truth."
Woo! Yes, sir.
Well, that'll wrap it up right there. All right there. Hey, y'all, thank y'all for listening and tuning in to the Dr. Love Show. Man, it has been an amazing podcast. It has been an amazing time. I hope that you got some tips, some nuggets, information that will move you to your next level in purpose. To my brother Al Shaheed Muhammad, man, I thank you, brother, for being on the show today. Man,
Honor to be on the show.
Bless the people, man. And to my brother, Pastor Tim, man, I truly thank you for being on the show, guys. So to everybody in listening to this podcast, hey, Dr. Love, from the Dr. Love Show to you, we love you, we bless you, and we thank you. And we're going to go take it on to the house, y'all. One love. Bye.
Peace.
Yeah.
It might seem crazy what I'm about to say.
Doc, I think that was all right.